Hi, everybody, and welcome back. As we've just had Fashion Week, so it's nice to get back to doing a few talks and being in the studio for FIDA Worldwide Talks. And we've got Senya here today, and I guess we're lucky to have Senya. Everyone's busy; they're freelancers and hardworking characters. So, any time that anybody gives us is great. So, before we sort of share your work, Senya, I'd be nice to kind of go for a little bit of your journey to where you are now and how you've got to the images that you make, which would be nice.
Sure, sure. Oh, I don't know how long before you want to start. But when I was a kid, I've never thought I will be an illustrator because I was interested in many different things like literature, video games, cartoons. But then one day, and I think I was 22 years old, just one day, I just felt this urge to draw. And at that time, I was already working as a graphic designer and I was finishing my university. And I just felt that I need to draw something. So I just found my old watercolors. I just found some brushes and I wasn't able to find any suitable paper, unfortunately. So it was just printing paper. I think something was even printed on the other side, but when you want to create something, you just do it. So I just created, I guess, my first illustration in years, and I enjoyed it so much that since then I was creating almost every day. And to grow in the illustration field, then I finished different courses, read books, attended master classes and lectures. But I think that was the first time when I was like, wow, I can do illustrations. And then I would say the main shift.
Yeah.
You had a question?
No, no, no. I was just, it's just nice to hear, using found old pieces of paper, this sort of desire to draw, a
Yeah,
sort
yeah,
of pull
I like
in,
watercolors.
which is quite nice, and just grabbing any equipment that you have.
Yeah, that's
That's really a nice way to put it. Is sometimes it's just a matter of fact that just drags you in, and you're just like, right, I just need to get on with this, and I just need to. It's something inside me that's kind of roaring out, and I think that's quite a nice way to put it. And also you have a sort of graphic design background, which I think really influences your work, which I can see heavily. And so what I'll do is just to give us a bit of a bit of context. I'm just going to share my screen and let's get on here. So let's just put this as a slideshow. Okay. So I guess we can start here. Let it load up.
Mhm.
It seems to be going low, sort of a slow. I don't know why it's loading. So here we go. Okay, so I found a little bit of information on you, and I guess what was really interesting to me was this sort of combination of almost. It looks like if you were drawing on newsprint paper, and the ink from the pen bleeds
Mhm.
a little bit. That's my impression I get when I see your line. And then this very graphic image making um, and selective sort of how you put things together, these sort of codes of image making makes it really interesting. So I guess for me, what is how did you kind of come around to the way that you're drawing now?
Oh, well, I would say the majority of illustrators have started with just the basics, but then when you evolve, when you learn more, you try different things, you just see what people out there, what they are creating, and you try to find your way. And I guess by just trying different things and trying to understand what I like, because I think it's very important to create what you want to create. Otherwise, it will be very difficult to continue doing for a long time.
Yeah.
So I know that I love nature. That's why I guess there are lots of different natural elements and floral designs and just flowers. And I think now it's even more simplified. So I'm still evolving. And now I think there are like even more flowers and less other objects. But at that time, I think this one was created about maybe a year and a half ago. So for this one, I like how I usually have like I usually wear glasses. That's why there are glasses there. So that's
Right.
how you can see the world probably, that you usually see things bigger sometimes when they're important. And if you're not looking at them through, let's say, you have a different perspective, they can be smaller if you're not focusing on them. So I would say this illustrations is about this, but
And uh, I guess these are mainly self-initiated works, or are they commissions as well?
I would say the majority of work that I share on Instagram is just personal projects.
Ah, so a bit of a luxury.
Yes. Well, I try to have this luxury because I believe that personal projects are very important.
And okay, so from a different point of view, is commissioned work coming from this? I'm guessing some of the typography and things like that, where you're incorporating text. I'm assuming they might be more commissioned work, but you can guide me from this sort of work. What sort of work has come from this?
I would say at some point, like when I was just starting, I was drawing more editorial illustrations that were on completely different subjects. So there were not a lot of floral elements, and I was drawing a little bit differently. And once I felt that that's the things I want to create, so I started to creating them and I was sharing them online. And when clients came, thankfully, some of them are like, hey, we want this, or we want something similar to this. For example, some time ago, people from a podcast approached me, and the podcast is Sex, Death, and Money. And they were creating a brochure for one of the episodes about mental issues and mental problems and like how we can discuss them. And they had one illustration plan for each of these sections. So let's say one section was experiencing loss or moving through life or fertility or having family, losing family. So lots of different subjects. And for each subject, I created an illustration, and this illustration was a flower. And that was my favorite project
Right.
because even with flowers, and they're like very simple in general, but you can express different ideas and emotions. For example, there was a section about being addictive to like something. And yes, there are like lots of different, I would say, like more straightforward ways of depicting addiction, but doing it with the flower moves us to more of an abstract way of drawing. So the meaning is still there, but it's not right to your face. So you need to spend your time and think about it. You'll need to discover it yourself. That's what I love.
Good. And do you have to convince, because you're using metaphors, did you have to convince the client to that, or they were like, look, this is a great idea. We're going to trust you.
Well, I would say it's both. Sometimes when I present my work, so it can be during a call, then I get a chance to speak and explain the ideas. If it's not a call, and let's say we're in a more high-paced environment, I can just create a presentation where I explain everything so that it will be crystal clear for people what I meant. Yeah, sometimes it is a fight, but
Yes, yes. I was going to say, and then I kind of, I then kind of moved on to these images because there's a real sort of, there's a playfulness, and I could really imagine your work really massive as well, like quite sculptural. I think there's so many opportunities of this sort of minimalist, and I think my kids were talking about like Alexander Calder, Klaus Oldenburg, who did these oversized sort of objects of big cherries and
mm,
forks and knives. And we've got the exhibition on at the moment with Michael Craig Martin, who also draws these large objects in a minimalist way. So there's a real sort of field for that. And And I think looking at your work and these little ideas, there's like this idea of like the knife cutting a bit of the flower. There is a bit of a narrative there, and I think that's quite a good. I didn't know that, so it was quite nice that you've woven in little metaphors into your work, which is really nice. And I think that that's a great. So I guess from an editorial point of view, what's the most other sort of interesting areas that you've done with your work? Exhibitions, art shows, murals.
Well, nothing actually. So I would say I mostly uh, just live on Instagram page, and that's it.
Okay. So with regards to your sort of career in this field, how long have you been working on in this direction?
I would say with illustration, I think for the last 3 years.
Okay, so quite
That's
new.
not a lot. Yeah.
Okay, so you've got lots of room then now to kind of think about because I've seen like other artists like John Booth who've got they've done small pieces and flowers and objects and then they've gone into ceramics and I really looking at your work it definitely could work in scale. Like it could scale up for huge hoarding for buildings, and there's a really interesting group in England called Graphic Rewilding, and what they do is they're sort of going along this idea of finding dead spaces or old building sites, and they wrap it with their flowers and plants and objects and they made it was all about rewilding areas with these graphics. And I think for yours, definitely like vinyl stickers that are really big. You could really imagine that. So I guess sort of moving forwards, and then hopefully in the future, when we come back to revisit you, we're going to see these huge. Have you got ambition to do big?
I would say I'm pretty, introverted person, so I like just creating things inside my apartment. And
Yeah.
I'm not very, like open. I try to be, but it's difficult. Yeah, to go in contact with like different people, different studios. Yeah,
Yeah.
but I guess as an artist, you should.
Yeah. Well, I guess sometimes, and this is why we created what we do, because we know a lot of illustrators are like you. They're not outgoing artists going crazy and big self-promoters. They're quite timid characters and they love to draw and they love to look into the small details of things. And I feel that someone else will grab you and see this work and go, big. We will deal with it, but it will be big, and we can imagine it on the sides of buildings for IKEA or something. God no, huge buildings where they have objects and plants. Comran would be in the UK. So I think there's 1,000% potential in what you do. It's just I guess some artists taking prints. Have you got a print series? Like if I wanted to buy prints of your work, do you have
Yeah,
prints?
I have a print shop. That's a thing I can do.
Right, okay. And have you done much inquiry into different ways of printing, or is it mainly giclée prints?
I have a print shop that I work with, and they're located in Paris. And I just upload files, and they do all other things. And so again, it's like the easiest way probably, but it saves me some time, so I can spend more time drawing again. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I guess yesterday we were speaking to another artist, and she was saying similar, just getting someone else to deal with all the other stuff, so
Yeah.
you can just continue drawing. And I think that's a really nice. And what's quite exciting for me, just looking behind you, is that you've got more mark making pieces that are a little bit more cruder than these final pieces. And I think is that where you're kind of moving into? So there's more texture or tactility. Like there's a big flower with some sort of a scribbled negative space. What's the
Uh,
plan?
well, I would say that I usually explore different materials like, I don't know, like here is oil pastel, and I explore it in a way so that I'll take something from it and take it into the digital world. So I just explore different lines and shapes and what I can do differently, because it's a different material. So it requires a different, like not a skill set, but a different way of thinking about what piece you will take. Because if you draw with just a pencil or oil pastel, the result will be different and the feel of it will be different. So I would say I mostly experiment with the, old way materials, but then I move it to the digital world.
Yeah, and I guess what's quite nice, um, we'll talk about this in a sec, but what's really nice about your work is quite sophisticated. And that's why through the sophistication of it, it feels like you've had a long time in the field. Like you've reduced it down, you've simplified, you've almost and you've said, this is the way I'm going to do it. That's a very uh, if someone who's been in the industry for like 15, 20 years and they're like, I've had enough, I'm doing it my way. And it's quite nice that you've kind of you're making them decisions.
Let's skip some part.
Yeah, so I think that's quite a good move. So what was this project? Was this a commission or a self-initiated?
That was also a self-initiative. Yeah, I would say the majority of work I post on Instagram is still my personal projects. For projects that I'm commissioned, I usually share them on like Behance or Dribbble, so on more work-oriented platforms. And Instagram, I just leave for myself to have fun. Because sometimes, again, like even if you're working with a client and they, let's say, they use a different color palette, but I don't want to ruin my nice images, with the different colors. So I just keep that work somewhere else. Because
Right.
again, like I would say there is nothing bad in sharing like personal projects, and people, even clients, they will see what they can get. And if I want to create more of this work, I think I should share it more. Yeah. And I think this series started with mm, I don't remember which word was the first one, but I think it might be like home or leaf or laugh. I think
Yeah.
it was leaf maybe. And and again, I was just doodling something in a sketchbook. And I think that's how I got the majority of my ideas. You just draw something, and then based on this something, you create more and more ideas. And it probably was just a squiggly line or something like a strange flower. And then I thought like, hey, I can create it into a word that will be fun. And I
Yeah.
did it.
No, really nice, and they're beautiful, and the colors are really nice, and the palette's refreshing. It's not too overpowering, and for me, when I see these, I can see them from a commercial point of view. You could imagine many people using these. So I'm pretty sure in time, advertising agencies will be crawling all over your work and picking you up because there's so much is beauty in just a word. And I think that's a real play. And, I've seen the journeys of artists similar to this. So it's really nice to see you sticking to your guns. So an interesting thing you said was that you put your work, that's more commercial work, on Behance or Dribble. Do you get most of your work through them spaces, or you just put your work up there that is commercial?
I would say I still get the majority of work through Instagram. But sometimes I think I had several clients coming from Dribble or Behance. But again, like because they're coming from there, they see different work and they see like more commercial projects, let's say, and they can ask for a different thing that people who come through Instagram will ask for. Because it's like a little bit different. I try to minimize and add more work into like Behance and Dribble, which is similar to Instagram. But if you like dig down enough, you'll find like older works. So sometimes like I would say like majority of people, they want, people, like the illustration of people and buildings and let's say like normal objects that you'll probably see in a newspaper or in an article. But we'll see where it goes.
Right. No, no. So it's just interesting to know, as a young uh, when I say young, a young person digging into the industry, where's a good space to go? And at the moment, everyone's still relying on Instagram, but then it was funny that you're using Behance and Dribble from a more commercial point, and then you kind of say, well, Instagram's my playground, and I'm sticking to my rules. Is my playground's here. If people want to see my fun work, but then over there is all my serious stuff where it's been art directed. It may be not as beautiful as I'd like it to be. The color palette wasn't as
Yeah.
beautiful. Yeah, I like it. And then I guess moving on to these sorts of flowers and still lifes. Uh, how do these like? Is it all just made up out of your head?
Yeah. I guess you just see objects around you, and when you are looking for inspiration, you'll find it. And I don't know, like I usually have flowers at home because I love flowers, and it's sometimes you can just you don't pay attention to like lots of things that are everyday small details, but sometimes you let's say you put something behind the vase and you're like, hey, it's bigger now. Like haven't noticed it before, so it's maybe worth drawing. Or well, I'm not sure what I wanted to say with a photo camera.
Yeah.
uh, but again, I guess it's growing.
Yeah, and I almost feel like these objects have been put into the wild and then things have grown through them into them. Is sort of an archiving of the past, and then objects coming through it, which is really nice. And I can see so much, and I love that idea of vases and glasses and refraction. You do
Mhm.
lots of this sort of play of things playing with perspective from glass, but not adding in any other elements. Just a case of oversizing and then maybe toning down the color, which is really a really smart move, really smart. And that's why I talk about the sophistication in the work, is the sophistication is coming from not getting frightened to overdraw and over design. It's really kept to this minimalist way of working, which is I think is lovely. And I can see the sort of nods to the past of Matisse and people like that where they flattened images and they using these sort of perspectives and that was their goal, is to take away form and flatten. So I love that. And color palettes, do you just go for it, or you're going on instinct, or do you think of any other things to inform your color palette? Do you play with the color palette?
Yeah, I do play. Sometimes I just, for example, the one on the left is different from the two of them on the other side, especially the one with a blue background. So let's say I find, like, I usually, like, I draw flowers a lot, so I need lots of greens. So that's how I usually start the color palette. But depending on the green, I can add different colors in different hues and saturations. So I would say it's usually starting, for example, it can start with a photo. I think one of the last color palettes just started with a photo of tulips that I handpicked somewhere in a farm. And they were so beautiful that I was like, hey, this can be this can be a next color palette. But let's say I picked several colors, and then based on, I guess, my knowledge of graphic design, which is helpful, I can build a color palette based on what I want it to look like with this, let's say, several points that I want to preserve. And I would say I change color palette from time to time because sometimes I just got tired of what I'm drawing with. And I would say there's probably a seasonal change to it. Because you probably draw with different colors in like winter and summer. And I would say I like experimenting with colors, but it usually happens again because I feel like I need to change it because I overgrown the colors that I've been using. For example, they're like maybe too vivid now for me because I feel like, I don't know, more dull.
Yeah, 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 good. And looking at this work in your head, so some people have a sort of vision of, where I was saying it could be vinyl stickers or it could be this. Do you have anything in your head that you think where it could, where you would like it to go? Like where, or you're just like, it's organic, I'm just drawing and I'm going with the flow.
Well, I'd say like an art exhibition will be a very interesting thing to have. Sometimes I can do a small things at home for my friends and like, hey, that's my work. That's because I have like lots of white walls. So you can use it in like your art gallery, but like the real art gallery or like a small show will be a nice thing, I think. And for, going out there to the world, that's a tricky question because um I don't have an answer probably. Like it's difficult to like at least for me to see my work somewhere in like a specific place. Let's say it's a billboard by why it's there. Is it promoting something? Like what is promoting? Is it like the project or like product that I want to promote? That's also like a balance of how to decide with whom to work, where to put your work. So
Yeah.
it's a difficult question. Yeah.
Yeah, it is hard. It's just um, sometimes art directors need you to dictate to, like you're putting things online and then people go, oh, well, this would look nice on a brochure or in a book or something like that. And then, if you're thinking large scale and then murals and things like that, where we see scale, that's that's where the next area that your kind of work could grow to. And then it could become more sculptural, working with a 3D designer who keeps the shapes and the forms. Because we're seeing lots of the very graphic illustrators going from a 2D to a 3D. We're starting to see it happen. And
Mhm.
that would be a really fascinating thing for a shift. Yeah, I think the shift is what would be a really nice thing to see. And, I can see these in print. I could imagine Paul Smith using these as graphics or embroidery. When I look at it, it just gets my imagination flowing of where would I put this and how would I do it? And is it something that could be small on a wallpaper that then grows into a room? Could it be part of a children's playground? All of these things kind of go through my mind when I'm looking at this work because the color palette's really appealing to young people. You're thinking of children's books, all of these areas. I think because of your understanding of graphics, I think that's quite important. And then I kind of play around these sorts of areas where there's sort of a room coming into the room. It's almost like the spaces are being inhabited by the plants or being taken over. I don't know if there's another hidden metaphor for that. Is like old places that the flowers are now growing in through the window, and sort of is there a link to that somewhere? I don't know. You could tell me this idea of like overgrown plantation or I don't know. Is there more of a story behind it? I guess you might know. All right, we
Yeah, I
don't.
would say it's a mix of what you are saying. And also, for example, the one with the blue background and flowers in the window, I think it was the beginning of spring, and it's just the feeling of spring you get. It's like getting everywhere because you feel spring. That's like, like the earlier flowers are starting to bloom, the flowers appear on the trees, and that's how I felt, I guess, during that spring.
Yeah,
That
I
it's
think.
in growth season, that everything is growing, yeah,
And
becoming colorful.
also, what I'd like to know is what is your process? How do you get to this technique of drawing? Like, where do you start and how do you finish?
Well, despite the fact that I prefer digital work over the analog way of drawing, I still like creating my first sketches or like to draw the initial rough ideas on just the paper. It's just a pencil or a fountain pen. And that's how I got like, and they're like super small. You just have the understanding of what you want to include in the drawing or like what the idea will be. And that's why my sketches are like super ugly because they're not for the art purposes. They're just to get the idea so that then when I'll see the sketch later, if I, let's say, don't have time now, I'll be able to understand what I meant. So they're like screenshots of the ideas. And then based on that sketch, I go to Procreate and then just to start building the shapes and figuring out the overall layout of the illustration, just to see what works, what maybe, I don't know, I need to update something or I need to try something new. And then once I have this, the base of the shapes, I will start adding color, because adding color sometimes changes the overall feeling of the piece, and you need to rework some of the detail that you've added before that, because color dictates its own rules. And that's how I create a piece.
And because you have a very unique line, did you generate your own brush or did you
No,
you've
it's actually a basic one from Procreate.
Procreate?
Yeah, but it's very similar to what you say, like a bleeding ink.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what I was saying to you. It looks
Yeah.
like a point, fine point pen drawn on newsprint, and it just bleeds a tiny little bit, and
Yeah.
it's just spot on. And have you used Dreams, the
Dreams.
Procreate Dreams?
I've tried it because I like creating animations too. And I usually create them very similar, where it's just flower growing or flower moving or I've tried it, but I need more time to explore it more, because I still create animation in Procreate, the original one. But I feel like I need to move to Dreams because it's like a dedicated program for this.
And
And
is it an easy? Do you reckon it's an easy shift? Because I'm starting to see people moving more into Dreams, but they're saying it's starting to get quite complex.
yeah, I've tried it. So I haven't created any like finished work in there. So I just was playing around when I have time. I would say it's very similar to Procreate, and after watching, a tutorial, it was very easy.
Right. Okay. Good. And so we tried to keep these talks quite short because we know everybody's got a busy life. So it was really fascinating to speak to you. But what's great? So there's two things, I guess. What's been brilliant is firstly you're new. I thought you had a really vast history because your work is very sophisticated, as I said, and the idea really you're thinking about the ideas. You also have got this sort of I'm going to do what I want, which is a very, very, very good approach to the way that you work. And also, if you stick to your guns and also bring in your methodology into the way that you work is really nice and not compromising. I think that's quite nice. Like you're like, I want to work this way. This is the way I'm going to work. It's at your pace. Uh, but I feel that I'd love to see you in 5 years' time when you're in demand and then rediscuss your feelings of
Sure.
of the illustration world because I think the work is really it's really relevant to now, and I think it's such nice work, and I'm really sort of hungry to see where this is going to go, and it's just going to take good art directors now to drag you into their good world, and also have exhibitions. So I'm looking forward to seeing more work and seeing what you're going to do. So
Yeah.
it'll be fascinating. But Senya, thank you so much. And we do try to keep these short, so because I know everyone's got lots of time, lots of things on their hands. So, but thank you so much, and thank you for sharing your work. It's beautiful work, and luckily we see the great work behind you because I'm fascinated by the drawings behind you as well because I feel
That's good to know.
there's a real sort of playground there. And I look behind you and I think there's another part to you which is the more tactile and the more childlike, which is great. But anyway, so I'll stop sharing now and then thank you so much. And you know, you're going to see with the awards as well. So we've got about a month or two of the awards, and then we'll get your feedback. And it's good to see you've got plants around you. Everybody I've spoken to has had plants around them. I've got plants up there, but they're not by me. So, but it's great. And thank you, Senya. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me, and I'm excited for the awards. Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you. Have a nice day.
Yeah, you too.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye bye. Bye bye.